But anyway, Liz, I'm telling you, I'm glad we still lived long enough to come back and do this. All right. Some people we didn't get to interview, but you and I can sit down and interview each other. And you like a big sister, you were there. You know, so.
It was crazy.
Yes, it was.
That's what I want to ask. What do you want to say about? Because you said people called you crazy. What do you want to say about Chief Walhorst? How people saw your experience.
Oh, okay. She can tell you about me. Go ahead, Liz.
Well, I mean, she's sort of, you know, when people kind of come out of nowhere and come up to you and say, "What are you doing? And why are you doing it? And what is all this about?" Which is what happened better than 30 years ago between the two of us. And I just told her, and she said, "Okay." And it was kind of from then on that we sort of blended well, you might say. Again, because we both wanted to see our community grow, and grow in a certain way that didn't harm the people that lived here or those that would be moving in, because we knew there'd be more folks moving in. That was pretty evident even back then. And so her efforts through all these years and the different directions that has taken has been interesting. And from time to time I would hear about some of them, and it'd be like, oh yeah, that's going to work out real well because she's got it in hand. And so that's pretty much been my experience with the chief. And so when all this came up, which ends up, you know, really affecting where she lives, where I live, it's a natural to again join arms and say, you know, let's do this together again, and let's let the community know they can have the effect of a change. You can't just say, oh, they're always going to get their way and da da da. And if you sit home and whine like that, that's not it's not what works. It's not what's worked in the past, and it's not worked on things that we've been involved in ever.
We had to do some crazy things.
Yes. I'm thinking of a couple right now, and I'm going, but
Oh, do tell.
This is all detail. These crazy things.
well, there was a night. I mean, back before we had a tax. I remember this so well. It's like, geez. Again, I was in my mid-30s at the time, and it was like we needed road signs, and we needed stop signs, and we needed all these other signs. And there was a certain gentleman in Lacombe that was able to get them all delivered to his barn, and they would never get down to the 9th Ward.
That's right.
So again, when we talk about, sometimes when I see us talking about color, sometimes it comes down to economics, because there were a lot of folks that lived on the little birdie streets off of Thompson Road. It's mixed in there, but there were a lot of, at that time, mostly young white kids. I call them kids because they were young people just getting started, and they were starter houses, and they had no stop signs, and people were running into each other and all this other. And I said, I know those stop signs are up in Lacombe. I know where they're at. So I get this young man. I said, and he said, oh, Miss Liz, I'll put them up, because we didn't have anybody working that could put them up. And he had a little crew from the neighborhood that said, we'll put the signs up. And so, okay. I said, I know where they're at. I said, does someone have a truck? Yeah, someone has a truck. So me and these two guys go over it, and I said, if the cops come out, we're all going to jail. We ended up jumping the fence at the barn up in Lacombe and took our signs. Put all our signs in the back of the truck, and they had them all up in there. And I remember him saying, he said, Miss Liz, I just got to tell you this. I said, what? He goes, I didn't vote for you. He said, but my wife did. He goes, but if you ever run for anything else, I said,
You'll vote for you this
as long as the sheriff doesn't show up tonight and get us. Because, I mean, that's really, like you say, the things that you sometimes do.
Yeah.
Now, those signs did belong to the 9th Ward. They were supposed to come down here.
And they was moving slow.
But they were waylaid and they're gonna get placed all in Lacombe. And I said, no, they're not.
We have some outside.
We've got a way to do this. And we did it. The other thing that I did that was kind of crazier was I learned how to run road equipment.
Yes.
Because I got sick and tired of road people saying, oh, it's going to take us another 3 weeks to get down that street doing the ditches and da-da-da-da-da. And I said, you know, So I called a gentleman up in the 2nd Ward, Mr. Herman Sharp, who was we never voted alike, never did. But he was an old country boy. And I said, I got to know how to run this stuff. And I said, if I come up to your district, I said, would you show me? So I got behind all this. He put me on I ran the ditch digger, I ran the thing that spins the ditches out.
See what I'm telling you about?
And I said, okay, I can pull this off. And so and so we collected, it was Riley Road, we collected money from the homeowners because you could not get down that street.
No, Raleigh was bad.
Oh my goodness. And so we collected some money from some folks. I called Johnny Smith up for the hot mix, and I said, we're gonna come get some hot mix. I said, I got someone who's driving the truck, but I said, I'm gonna be mostly, and then we had these young kids working for summer on a program, and I had 3 of them stuffed in the truck with me. And I said, okay, here, we're gonna go get, so we pull up, we get the hot mix, and then we just started filling potholes.
So you see why we were called crazy?
I was.
That's what you had?
You got the job done.
I had the authority when I was a police juror to do that.
That's correct.
I didn't have authority when I was a councilman, but when I was
Police jury, you take care of your own district.
It's right. So I went and I said, I would say, I don't. Well, and the funniest part was we had a barn down on Minerva Road.
Yep.
And when I was learning how to spin the ditches out, and I started to take our equipment out of the 9th Ward barn down there, is that I then got to the side, and where there's like it's like a piece of the equipment that kind of covers so that when you're spinning mud out, it doesn't just splash all over the yard. It goes kind of straight to maybe the first 1.5 feet or so the other side of the ditch you're spinning out. Well, I forgot to put the little thing up, this little deal down, and it's up. And this guy had a beautiful white picket fence.
Oh my gosh.
You spun mud all over.
I spun mud, like for probably 200 feet. And I'm trying to get the thing, finally got the thing to go down. Well, the guy comes out that owns the thing, and I'm thinking, oh man, wait. And he just started laughing. And he went and just got his hose and started hosing all the mud off.
He had a good leader.
But he had his ditch dug in front of his house.
I'm gonna make y'all laugh on this one. She had to tell me about this one recently. I hadn't seen her for a minute because she's working in a health thing and I'm doing my travel thing. So it was time for ceremony of the dead.
Yeah, the first of
That's
November.
the story she ought to tell y'all because I hadn't seen her in a while. I'm gonna let you tell that story when I saw you again. I hadn't seen her. We worked hard.
Yeah, and when we had gone, I had taken a gentleman friend who's from New Orleans who didn't know about this custom, and I said, oh yeah, I said, it's on the 1st, and I said, so we had gone down to Dubuisson graveyard, and then I knew about the one that was up Dixie Ranch because I had lived off of Fenner for a little while. And I said, so let's go see it. It's a smaller, and then we were going to head up to Lacombe to OC and Williams up there and see what was going, who was there, and he could. He's a big historian too. He is a tour guide, and so he knows a lot about the history of New Orleans and the area. And so when you see the names of the people and when they lived and all that, it was very, very interesting. Anyway, so we get up, and it's very dark because the trees and stuff are so overgrown in the little one. And you guys, I think, were up taking care of your family's graves at that point in time. Well, we're in this graveyard, like in the middle of the woods, okay? And he and I are just looking at it, and all of a sudden, this voice out of nowhere says, Liz Teague. And I thought my friend was gonna fall out, because he's like, oh my God, is someone getting raised from the dead? What's going on? Out of a dark graveyard on,
So,
in the middle
make
of
a
the
long story
woods.
short, she was educating her friend on our culture. And it wasn't a Catholic thing, because if it was, it'd have been in New Orleans too.
Yeah.
But she had been over here with us, so she knew where we would be on that particular night. It was the time when we were gonna light up. And very few people had a chance back then to see the beauty of it.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Yes, it is. And it's still my favorite time of the year. Matter of fact, next month starts the time to get them burials. And why I brought that up, I was telling them the other day that the parish always, after they took the sand and the shells away from us, when we didn't have access, the parish have always, even when you were there, brought us our sand
to
for the
redo
ceremonies.
the,
Yes. So a lot of people don't know that the parish have funded the sand for us to continue being mound builders. So a lot of people don't know what that's about, but that is a part of the ceremony of us who are mound builders. And if people wouldn't be pouring slabs and building tombs, in another 100 to 200 years, the mound would go even higher. But we are mound builders, and that's what she had a chance to see. And it's not something done for show, because we wouldn't be in the woods in the dark. Okay? It's something we do, and it's not spooky, but it's us taking care of our people. And it's done at night because of the beauty of the candles, but also it was a way to protect ourselves from Europeans. Back in the days, it was illegal for us to serve any of our ceremonies in this area. So our burials was already near water, or in the woods, and only time you would have ever saw that, the Catholic people went in the daytime, and the priests.
Before sunset would, bless it.
That's right. Our burial have never been a part of a priest, because it was not a Catholic thing, but those in the Catholic Church were able to hide their tradition underneath the All Saints. But it's a difference between All Saints and Ceremony of the Dead. So, again, trying to keep them alive and trying to keep builders from digging up all the mounds that it took thousands of years to build. I think some of those things need to be a part of culture and history for everybody to understand. I know Ceremony of the Dead, we don't want people there sightseeing on us, but the history need to be remaining for the kids of the tribe. Any questions for us before we close out on you?
Did your friend learn something that night about the ceremony of the dead?
Not really, because we didn't really stay for any ceremony. And I think what he was very interested in, it was almost like the lineage and the last names and
Yes.
how they connected, and it showed that it was one big community over here.
Right.
It was not, it was divided in the daytime, okay?
Yes.
But obviously at night it wasn't. And also you saw then all the family connections that were there, because especially when we went from one of the graveyards to the other, because it was cousins. They were cousins.
You see the story.
Yeah, and then you saw the biggest connection to New Orleans, though, I think came from when we went through OC up in
Yeah, because then you're going to start getting the Cousins, and those families start to marry into the tribe, and then you start picking it up. But if you really look in the burials here, and you can go to Pearl River or wherever, the burials tell a story within itself. And that's along the whole entire Gulf Coast. So, at one time, this was one big family. It's not their fault.
It's the same thing in New Orleans with the graveyards. You can go through them and see the history of New Orleans through the graveyard.
Yeah. So it's a very important part of our families, and we need the younger people to stay involved or get involved, if you're not involved, in your burials, so you can maintain them, because there's a story there, can be passed from generation to generation. I wanted to share that part with you, because I didn't mean to scare them that night. It was just the ideal. I recognized her voice.
It's like, because we were talking about the different families and the names we were seeing.
And your name was announced so loudly through the graveyard.
That was me
out loud.
When we come to Jesus, you're like,
So I told her that was a good one. But y'all, thank y'all from listening at her, and I'm going to tell you, this is a sister to me here. We looked out for each other back then, and we're going to continue doing that.
we're doing some of the same stuff. She went down and stole a sign.
I said we did some crazy things.
Ran the equipment. I was so impressed.
They're slinging mud on it.
Yeah, I was like, I was moving, and I went, oh my.
Good thing you wasn't around for Katrina. Kevin Davis, I was in Arkansas. I just can't wait to do the show with Kevin. Kevin up there, they didn't have no trailers coming in. And all the trailers was stuck in Hammond or somewhere. And I had been out to Hope, Arkansas, because I had just left Washington. Kevin had went to Washington. He left. I went into Washington. And he told both of us the trailers was available for our areas. So I was sent back to go to Hope, Arkansas, to go where all the trailers were. I mean, it was just thousands and thousands
there were-
and
yeah.
thousands of trailers. So I'm up there going through these thousands of trailers, and it was like 5 or 6 different sizes occurring. And I came back in, and I got a call from my uncle, and he says, Kevin is cutting up on the news. I said, what are you cutting up about? He said, Kevin is telling them he's fixing to take his polices and he going to get them trailers. I'm like, oh, Kevin, he can't leave me. I went to dialing Kevin on the phone. I'm like, I'm going. Give me a while to get home. It's going to take me about 6 hours. And we were going to go get them trailers. You know, but that's what I call good leaders. I couldn't let him go down by himself. So could you imagine if me, you, and Kevin was around doing Katrina? Wouldn't have been no problems around here. Why? Because leadership steps up and be leadership.
Right.
That's what that's called. So I told Kevin he wasn't going down by himself. I was coming to go to jail with him. Let's go get them trailers. That's your polices. Let's get your polices and let's go get them. And I really believe if they wouldn't stop bringing those trailers, Kevin was going to take his polices and
get
go
'em.
get the trailers. And I just have crazy people that I like in politics, okay? If they too sensible, I don't want to deal with them. If they too politically correct, I don't want to deal with them. I like crazy leaders.
Like self-oriented, a lot of them nowadays are self-motivated. It's all about them. It's not about the people. It's what they can get before they leave office. That's what I see a lot of the politicians. They only looking to see what they can get before they leave. Yeah, they want to be wealthy and
We didn't even
take
have
care.
sense. We didn't even have sense to ask for money back then. What are you talking about? We were too busy fighting.
But that's their only interest now.
We didn't know you needed money to
It's
fight.
how much money they can get for, if I get your project done, how much you gonna give me? You know, and then we gotta take care of them people.
Now they had those
Leave
type
office.
politicians there,
Uh-huh.
but it just wasn't the ones that was within my arena. I couldn't work with that.
Right.
So I have another question. What, you were twice a parish council person, or
I
were
was-
you under police jury?
I was a parish council person the first time, and then the second time I was a police juror. And then I didn't run anymore. I said I had a lot of personal problems in my life and 2 little ones to raise on my own because of those personal problems. So I had to say I can't serve anymore. And
Wait,
so
Is that, when did the police jury transition?
well then what happened was that council just maybe 10 years ago? When did they then go
Yeah.
back?
It went back.
About 10 years ago, the council actually formed a committee that drew up a second charter and then came back. What happened, that was pretty sneaky too. The
Yes, it was.
reason we lost the first charter government was because there was no money to do anything. You know, there were no taxes to do roads, ditches, culverts, nothing.
And you home rule,
And-
meaning you controlling your area.
Right, and so what happened was, some of the people that were on the council at the time said, this isn't working, especially in the rural areas. We want to have a straw vote and see if the people want to go back to a police juror. Well, then they called this election. Well, all of our areas didn't get out and vote. They're like, it's a straw vote, what are we doing? So what happened was the country folks got out and voted, and they voted down the charter form of government. They voted down the first charter. They didn't want, and then they have the attorney come in and say, well, you know, there's no straw voting in Louisiana. So that
Outside
vote was
people-
real, and we're going to now go back to a police juror. It was such a bait and switch.
Yeah, they should.
I had never seen the likes of done by a seated governmental body in my life.
And you know what I found out back then? A lot of these people that was in politics didn't understand the difference in the Louisiana laws and the other states they came from. Because and still today we haven't been elected that way. And we under a Napoleonic law, and they're coming from common law places. And I start to learn years later those two things was clashing, and still today.
Somewhat. They've done a lot, especially in commerce, to make sure that it's not different, because that
But it
would be a
happens
big
down here.
detriment.
But down here, we still have that difference. Like, even within them with Mississippi, when I'm working over there, the laws are so much on the base at the bottom is so different that if I would go into Mississippi right now dealing with sunshine law, don't have that. We fought a while back, Mississippi, in I think it was 2013, just abolished slavery.
Just.
And it was people like me that started cutting up. You know, Mississippi haven't abolished slavery yet. And it took us many years complaining about that. The young man protest on the beach years ago.
Rip Daniels.
Rip Daniels' son went on a starvation diet. And I was coming through from Georgia, and just had a meeting with SCLC. And Rip called me and said, "My son on the beach, you're not eating. You're trying to bring attention to the rebel flag and the issues that's going on." And he's a grown man now. But back then is when I realized, when I went to research about the rebel flag in Mississippi, I discovered that they had not abolished slavery yet. Okay? So a lot of these laws, we got people going in office and not studying laws. Some things need to be dealt with before we move on further. And it was so embarrassing to Mississippi on the end that not only now have they changed the flag, but they did go ahead on, and I think it was 2013, the year J-Lo was born.
You also had to do some teaching at the courthouse with the Usurper laws.
That's right.
Here in Slidell. They
Yeah.
had no idea what
a
it
usurper law.
meant.
What is it?
A usurper in Louisiana, underneath the French law and under the Napoleonic law, you can assign a usurper to your property.
Yes, first and last.
And that person, and that's some of the stuff that we were running into back then when people didn't have the deeds, but they were still passing it down from generation to generation. It was actually underneath the usufruct law. So Louisiana still recognized usufruct law. Mississippi and other areas don't even have a usufruct law. We're
A lot
under
of times that
because
would happen when people would get divorced, or you wanted perhaps an older person to live out the rest of their
their
life
life there.
in a house where they were. I mean, it's your house, you're gonna inherit it or you're gonna get it.
That's right.
But you say, no, mom or dad can stay there till they pass.
That's correct. And other
It's
states,
usufruct.
a lot of other states don't have that.